At the edge, huh? How'd I get here? Mary looked around, but everything around her seemed to be out of focus. Her head felt woozy and like it was being spilt open. How did I get up here? She thought. In a distance, she saw a blurry image of a person. Mary shook her head, but the sharp pain run through her head, reminding her of its presence. She tried to get up and quickly dropped back to the ground like a bag of potatoes. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes and tried to calm herself. When she opened her eyes, she could see relatively clear. Mary turned her head to the direction of the person she had seen earlier. It was a man, and he was standing at the edge of the rooftop. She looked around, a cold wind brushing the surface of her skin as her curly hair blew backwards. Her focus returned to the man standing at the edge. He was wearing a black plain t-shirt and black faded jeans. He seemed to be looking down at the cars moving below on the road. What is he doing? Feeling her energy coming back, Mary lifted herself up, using the wall she was leaning against for support. Her legs were shaking but she managed to gain control. Hey, she shouted, startling the man who swiftly turned to face her. He had a long cut across his right eye. Mary wondered if he could see with that eye. His skin was pale and tears were rolling down his cheeks. Mary began to move closer but the man stepped back, and this time he was at the very edge. Mary paused on her tracks, clearly something was not right. She opened her mouth to say something but froze when the man smiled. His eyes were locked on Mary's. It was like as if he was saying goodbye without saying a word. Sensing what was coming next, Mary rushed towards the man. No. Wait, but he fell backwards. Mary shot up from her bed, like she had just returned from the dead. Her breathing was labored and her pajamas were sticking on her body. She held her hands to her chest. It was just a dream, breathing in slowly to compose herself. Strange, she thought. What was that just now? Sun rays were piercing through her curtains. She moved towards her window and opened it. She loved the feeling of the morning sun against her skin. She closed her eyes and took it all in, but the image of the man's face in her dream flashed in her mind. Alarmed, she quickly opened her eyes. I need a shower. Mary decided to go to a nearby cafe for coffee. She had a lot of deadlines to meet and so she came along with her laptop. Lately, she had been occupied with her online classes with the upcoming exams occupying most her mind. She opened her emails and begun looking through them. A waiter came to her table, but she was so cooked up in sorting her emails that she didn't notice the waiter standing next to her table. Excuse ma'am, a calm manly voice spoke, getting Mary's attention. Oh, sorry, Mary giggled lightly. When she looked up to the waiter, her jaw dropped. She quickly covered her mouth with her hand. The waiter twitched his eyes wondering if the lady was shocked by the big cut across his eye. I get that a lot, said the waiter in a sarcastic tone. Sorry, realizing she had offended him. Where's the bathroom? Oh, just go down straight and turn to your right. Mary rose up, thank you, and moved past the waiter. He watched her as she disappeared down the hall and shook his head. Am I that scary? Letting out a sigh, Mary splashed water on her face. It is him. It is definitely him, the man in my dream. Oh God, am I dreaming again? What's going on? She looked herself in the mirror and slapped her cheeks hard with both hands. She was clearly awake. She returned to her table and looked at the waiter from a distance as he served another table and disappeared to the kitchen. He later reappeared talking to another waiter. Mary couldn't make out what they were saying but she got a hint that he was leaving. I guess his shift is over. Mary decided to follow the waiter as he left the cafe. She quickly packed her laptop in her bag and followed the waiter out, keeping some distance. She noticed that he had changed his clothes. Wearing the same black t-shirt and black jeans she had seen in her dream. He walked amongst a crowd of people and Mary struggled to keep up with him. He stopped to cross the road and then disappeared at a nearby alley. Mary reached the alley but she could see him anymore. Where has he disappeared to now? Mary held her waist. What is the meaning of all this? Why am I even following him? She turned to walk back when all of a sudden she felt a sharp pain on the back of her head. Then, all of a sudden, everything turned black. Mary opened her eyes slowly, blinking twice in the process. There was a ringing sound going through her head as she sat upright. Ah gosh, this hurts. She looked around and instantly recognized where she was. Oh God, no. Mary could hear the beat of her heart as she saw the waiter standing at the edge of the building rooftop. 8.
Wish I had another moment with my mom. Growing up I always thought my parents were too strict with me, especially my mom. Don't get me wrong, my mom was very loving. She went to work during the week, she kept the household going and would make sure that the weekly grocery shop was done, laundry was up to date and the house was clean. Above all, she was quick to make peace and give a hug. She would even fight my battles for me. I remember being in high school and my accounting teacher had given me a hard time that particular day. I was a very quiet and coy child. She had screamed at me during the class and had shouted that I get out and leave the room. I just sat there, red-faced, not moving. Later that afternoon we were in Edgar's, a retail departmental store, and lo and behold, who should I see but the accounting teacher. Quickly, I had told my mom what had happened that day in the accounting class. The teacher spoke to my mom as if butter would not melt in her mouth. She then said to my mom that I had given her a hard time in class that day, to which my mom replied that it seemed the other way around. The teacher turned around, red-faced, and walked away, and I knew secretly that I had won. My mom knew the story and the teacher was not going to get the better of me. Looking back on my life as a child, my life was very sheltered. I was not allowed to walk to the cafe on my own. The cafe was down the road, a block from where we stayed, and there were no streets to cross. When my friends went ice skating on a Friday evening and I was invited, I was never allowed to go alone. I was never allowed to have sleepovers at a friend's house. I was never allowed to go to parties. I was never taught how to ride a bicycle and allowed to cycle, experiencing the wind blowing through my hair whilst cycling to school. I was never allowed to have a boyfriend while going to school. As a child, my mom was my parent. She never acted as my friend. When I got to college, I often used to think about how cool my friends' moms were. Their household seemed so warm and inviting, so easily accepting of others. I could never invite a friend to stay for the weekend. It would be awkward and uncomfortable. It felt as if my mom would be listening to every word that I would say to my friend visiting. Hence, I would never take a friend home. I felt that the treatment had gotten worse since my childhood. By the time I had started to work, I had to be home at a decent hour. This was virtually impossible as the clubs only opened at 11 p.m. My friends and I would have supper and then afterward go clubbing. I would mostly get home at 5 a.m. the next morning, only to find my mom waiting up for me in the sitting room. My mom had called the police a few times. I could not even sneak into the house. My mom believed that a girl should only move out of her parents' house once she got married. It felt as if I was between a rock and a hard place, not ready for marriage but unable to go clubbing with friends during my free time. The worst part for me was that I could not call my mom to let her know where I was or if I would be late. She would simply not understand. They say that blood is thicker than water, which rings true, but we had a communication breakdown. We could not speak to each other freely and openly. I would often remain in my bedroom and avoid confrontation than have my mom upset with me. There was no need to say anything to me, just the stare she would give me and the look of her eyes would say 1,000 words. That alone would scare me and I knew to tread carefully. I got married in 1998 and my mom and I only became friends for the 5 years that followed. She passed away in April 2003 of breast cancer after a very brave fight. It was only in 2005, when my son was born, that I sadly developed a deep appreciation for my late mom. Things that my son would do made me think back to my childhood. How my mom would react and how I wished to react. I understood that my mom had done her very best at the time. It was when my son was around 2 years of age that I missed my mom. I knew that we would have been in a place where she could have given me advice and helped her daughter raise her grandson. A mom's instinct is to protect her child. At times it could be a little too smothering and result in too much sheltering. I was adamant from the start that I would try and be an even better mom to my son. I researched the Maria Montessori method. I did the 2-year theory and practical course to better understand the teaching method. My son attended a few Montessori schools and he was taught at a very young age to be independent and to think out of the box. He was guided instead of always told what to do and how to do it. I remember the beginning stages of when he just started to walk. We were living in a double-story semi-detached house at the time. Every time he came sliding down the staircase, I held my breath, but he had to learn how to.